The hum of the ultrasound machine was supposed to be the soundtrack to the happiest day of her life. They were about to see their baby for the first time. Her husband, Torren, a man who could buy cities, held her hand, his grip like ice. As the doctor showed them the tiny beating heart, he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. What a mistake. He thought his secret was safe. He thought his money could bury the truth. But he never counted on the doctor in that room, a woman who saw more than just a picture on a screen. She saw his lie, and she was about to reveal a shocking truth that would shatter a gilded world forever. The silence in the Bentley was a familiar character in their marriage. It was a heavy, opulent silence, cushioned by hand-stitched leather and the whisper-quiet engine, but a silence nonetheless. Torren Hawthorne, her husband of 3 years, drove with an unnerving stillness, his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked streets of New York City. His profile, sharp and handsome like a Roman coin, was a mask of serene indifference. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry, the brilliant CEO of Hawthorne Holdings, a man whose Midas touch turned every venture into gold. To Katya, he was becoming a beautiful, unknowable stranger. Their home, a sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue that Torren called the Observatory, for its floor-to-ceiling windows felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every piece of art, every piece of furniture had been chosen by him. Her life, she was beginning to realize, had also been curated. She had been a promising art historian at the Met when they met. He had swept her off her feet with a whirlwind romance that felt like a fairy tale, dinners in Paris, surprise trips to see the Northern Lights, a blinding diamond that felt more like a beautiful handcuff. He had convinced her to leave her job. An artist needs a patron, Katya, he'd said, and a historian needs to be surrounded by history in the making. Your work is me now. It's us. And she, blinded by love and the sheer force of his personality, had agreed. Now her days were a structured series of luncheons with the wives of his business associates, charity galas, where her only role was to smile, and where his chosen designer, and long quiet afternoons, staring out at a city she lived in but no longer felt a part of. The pregnancy had been her idea, a desperate attempt to build a bridge across the growing chasm between them. She thought a baby, a piece of both of them, would force him to see her again, not just the polished accessory on his arm. When she told him, his reaction was muted. A flicker of something unreadable in his cool gray eyes, a tight smile. A Hawthorne air, he'd said the words, tasting of legacy and lineage, not love and joy. We'll need to adjust the nursery plans. The ride to the renowned obstetrician, Dr. Anya Sharma, was no different. He hadn't wanted to come. It's the 20-week scan, Torren, she had pleaded. We'll find out the gender. It's important. He had sighed, a long-suffering sound. I have the merger with Sterling Thorne, Katya. It's a delicate phase. This is more important than Sterling Thorne. She had said, a rare spark of defiance flashing within her. His jaw had tightened. Fine. I'll move my meeting with Mr. Sterling. But let's be efficient. Now in the sterile, quiet room, the scent of antiseptic cleaner sharp in the air, that efficiency was all he radiated. He checked his Patek Philippe watch twice while the technician prepped her. Katya lay on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her, her stomach bare and covered in a cold, clear gel. Dr. Sharma entered with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a sharp, observant woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being one of the best. Mr. and Mrs. Hawthorne, ready for the big show. Ready as we'll ever be, Katya said, trying to inject some lightness into the room. Torren simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the large monitor. The technician, a young woman named Chloe, moved the transducer across Katya's belly. A monochrome world swirled into existence on the screen. It was abstract at first, a collection of shadows and light. Then Chloe pointed, and there we are. See that little flicker? That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. Tears instantly welled in Katya's eyes. A tiny, pulsating light in the darkness. It was real. A life. Her baby. She turned to Torren, her heart overflowing, expecting to see a reflection of her own awe. His face was stone. He wasn't looking at the heartbeat. He was looking at the vague outline of a tiny head, the curve of a minuscule spine. His hand, which had been resting limply on hers, tightened. She thought it was a gesture of shared emotion until he leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. The warmth of his breath was a stark contrast to the icy cruelty of his words. "It's a mistake." The whisper was so low, so venomous, it was like a snake bite. For a heartbeat, she thought she'd misheard. The hum of the machine, the doctor's cheerful commentary, surely she'd imagined it. But then she saw the subtle shift in his jaw, the cold finality in his eyes as he looked away from the screen and stared at a blank spot on the wall. He had said it. He had looked at their child, their miracle, and declared it a mistake. The air rushed out of her lungs. The tears that had been tears of joy turned to ash, burning her cheeks. Her hand went cold in his. The room, which had felt full of life and promise a moment before, was suddenly a tomb. Dr. Sharma and Chloe were oblivious, their professional chatter filling the void. "Everything looks perfect, Katya. Limbs are all there. Measurements are right on track. Do you want to know the gender?" Her voice was a strangled whisper. I don't know." Torren released her hand and stood up, smoothing his bespoke suit jacket. "I have to take a call. The Sterling-Thorne merger won't wait." He looked at Dr. Sharma, a mask of polite apology firmly in place. "Doctor, please send the bill to my office. Katya, my driver, Thomas, will take you home." He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the screen again. He just walked out, leaving her half-naked on a paper-lined table with the ghost of his words echoing in the silent spaces of her heart. A mistake. Her baby. Their baby. A mistake. Dr. Sharma's cheerful demeanor had vanished. She looked from the empty doorway back to Katya's tear-streaked face. She turned to Chloe. "Chloe, could you give Mrs. Hawthorne some privacy to get dressed? And please hold all my calls for the next 15 minutes." Once Chloe had left Dr. Chasur, Sharma pulled a stool over her expression, a mixture of professional concern and something deeper. Something intensely human. She saw the devastation. She had to have seen Torren's chilling detachment. "Katya," she said softly, her voice a lifeline. Deep breaths. "Can you tell me what happened just now?" Katya shook her head, a sob catching in her throat. He said. She couldn't repeat it. Saying it out loud would make it irrevocably real. Dr. Sharma didn't press. She simply placed a comforting hand on Katya's arm. Torren's reaction was unusual, especially for a first-time father. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, held Katya's. "I have been a patient of the Hawthorne family's preferred hospital network for years. Torren's medical file is extensive. I took the liberty of reviewing it before this appointment as a matter of due diligence." Katya frowned, confused. "His medical file? Why, doctor?" Sharma hesitated, as if weighing her next words on a scale of professional ethics versus human decency. There was a notation from his primary care physician, a Dr. Alistair Finch, to cross-reference his records with any spousal maternity care. It was an odd flag, so I looked into it. She took a deep breath. "Katya, what I'm about to tell you is a serious breach of patient confidentiality. But given what I just witnessed, I believe it is a matter of your safety and well-being." A cold dread, far colder than the ultrasound gel, seeped into Katya's bones. "What is it? Torren had a severe case of mumps as a teenager?" She began, her voice low and steady. It was complicated by a condition called orchitis, inflammation of the testicles. The medical terms meant little to Katya. She was still stuck on the word mistake. The inflammation caused significant irreparable damage. Dr. Sharma continued, her gaze unwavering. "We ran a series of tests on him afterward. I have the records here. Katya, Torren Hawthorne is and has been since he was 16 years old completely and irreversibly sterile. His condition is called azoospermia. There is a 0% chance that he can conceive a child naturally. The room began to spin. The black and white image of her baby on the screen seemed to mock her. 0% chance. Sterile. Irreversible. What are you saying? She stammered, her mind refusing to connect the dots. Dr. Sharma's voice was gentle, but her words were devastatingly clear. I'm saying, Katya, that Torren knows he cannot be the father of your baby. The pieces clicked into place with the force of a gunshot. His muted reaction to the pregnancy, his distance, his controlling nature, and the whisper. It's a mistake. The mistake wasn't the baby. The mistake wasn't the pregnancy. The mistake was that she had gotten pregnant at all, because he knew with absolute scientific certainty that he wasn't the father. He hadn't been accusing the baby of being a mistake. He had been accusing her. The drive home from Dr. Sharma's office was a blur. Thomas Torren's stoic driver navigated through the city traffic with his usual silent competence, occasionally glancing at Katya in the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed with what might have been concern. She sat numbly in the back of the Bentley, the plush leather feeling like a cage. Her hand rested protectively on her belly, a gesture that was now fraught with a terrifying new meaning. Dr. Sharma's words echoed in her mind, a relentless, deafening drumbeat. Sterile. Irreversible. 0% chance. The doctor had been kind. She had given Katya a glass of water, a box of tissues, and the space to let the initial shock wash over her. She had also given her a warning. A man like Torren Hawthorne, with his resources and his pride. He will not take this revelation lightly, Katya. He is not a man who likes his narrative to be challenged. Be careful. She had printed a copy of the diagnostic report from Torren's file, a document dated over a decade ago, signed by a Dr. Alistair Finch, detailing the diagnosis of azoospermia. Proof is your only power now, she'd said, sliding it into a plain manila envelope. Guard this with your life. Back in the sterile perfection of the observatory, Katya walked through the cavernous living room like a ghost. The Warhol prints on the wall seemed to scream in silent mockery. The cityscape outside, usually a source of comfort, felt alien and menacing. Her whole life, this beautiful, curated life, was a lie, a meticulously constructed sham. She had not cheated on Torren. Not once. The very idea was absurd. She loved him, or she had loved the man she thought he was. Her mind raced frantically, trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring her in the face. A miracle. A misdiagnosis. A 1 in a billion chance. But Dr. Sharma's certainty had been absolute. The proof was in the envelope clutched in her hand. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, then how was she pregnant? The question was a black hole threatening to swallow her whole. Torren came home late that evening. She heard his keys in the door, the soft click as he locked it behind him. She was sitting in the dark, the envelope on the marble coffee table in front of her. She hadn't moved for hours. He switched on a low lamp and the room was bathed in a soft golden glow. He loosened his tie, his movements fluid and confident. Katya. Why are you sitting in the dark? He didn't sound angry, just weary. The powerful CEO home from a long day of empire building. We need to talk, Torren, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. Can it wait? The Sterling Thorne deal is at a critical juncture. I'm exhausted. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. It can't wait. She gestured to the envelope. I had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Sharma today, after you left. A flicker of something, anger, fear, crossed his face before being instantly suppressed, replaced by a look of paternalistic concern. He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a deliberate distance between them. Are you all right? Is the baby okay? You seemed overwrought at the clinic. The casual cruelty of his words, the way he pretended her distress was just hormonal imbalance, ignited a fire in her chest. The baby is fine. But you know that, don't you? You saw the heartbeat. You also called our baby a mistake. He had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable. Katya, you misheard. The room was noisy. I was talking about the merger. Don't lie to me, Torren, she said, her voice rising. Don't you dare lie to me. I heard you perfectly, and now I know why you said it. She pushed the envelope across the table. Dr. Sharma showed me this. Your medical file. From when you were 16. He glanced at the envelope but didn't touch it. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, and the mask of the concerned husband dissolved, revealing the monster beneath. It was a chilling transformation. Dr. Sharma seems to have a problem with patient confidentiality, he said smoothly, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. I'll have my legal team address that with the hospital board. She'll be lucky to practice medicine in this state again. This isn't about Dr. Sharma. This is about you, about us. Katya was on her feet now, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. You're sterile, Torren. You have been for years. You knew you couldn't be this baby's father. You let me believe. You let me think I was going crazy. Why? He stood up, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. He was no longer the charming man she had married. He was a predator. I didn't let you believe anything, Katya, he purred, taking a step towards her. I reacted to a simple biological fact. You came to me, told me you were pregnant. I am your husband. What was I to conclude? The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think I cheated on you. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. The science is quite clear. I cannot have children. You are having a child. The conclusion is elementary, my dear. I was willing for the sake of appearances to overlook your indiscretion, to raise the child as my own, to give it the Hawthorne name, the Hawthorne legacy. All I asked for was your discretion. But you couldn't even manage that. You had to create this drama. It was gaslighting of the highest order. So complete, so audacious that for a moment she almost questioned her own reality. He was twisting her fidelity into a betrayal, her joy into a scandal. He was painting himself as the magnanimous, cuckolded husband willing to forgive her transgression for the sake of his name. The mistake he'd referred to wasn't just her pregnancy, it was her failure to keep the secret of her affair. I never cheated on you, she whispered, horrified. I would never. Then how do you explain it? He shot back, his voice like a whip. A divine, immaculate conception. Did an angel visit you while I was closing the deal in Tokyo? Tears streamed down her face, hot and furious. I don't know. That's what I'm asking you, but I know I was faithful to you. He laughed, a short, ugly sound devoid of humor. Fidelity, a quaint concept. It doesn't matter anymore. You've made it matter. By bringing this out into the open, you've forced my hand. He walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey, his back to her. You will carry this child. When it is born, you will sign over all parental rights to me. I will have a non-disclosure agreement drawn up, a very generous one. You will be well compensated for your services. Then you will disappear. You will move to Europe or California, I don't care. You will never contact me or the child again. Katya stared at him aghast. You want to buy my baby? You want me to give you my child and just leave? It's not your child, he said, turning to face her, his eyes like chips of ice. Genetically, it is half yours. But it will be a Hawthorne. It will be raised as my heir. You are merely the vessel, a very beautiful but ultimately disappointing vessel. The cruelty was breathtaking. He was systematically dismantling her identity, wife, partner, and now mother. She was nothing to him but a means to an end, an incubator for an heir he desperately needed but couldn't produce himself. Her mind reeled back to the central, impossible question. If she hadn't cheated and he was sterile, the answer had to lie somewhere in the space between those two truths. And Torren, in his arrogance, had just given her a clue. He wasn't surprised by the pregnancy. He was angry it had become complicated. He had a plan already in place. This wasn't a shock to him. This was an inconvenience. Her fear began to morph into something else. A cold, hard resolve. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. And he had underestimated her. No, she said the word tasting of newfound power. He raised an eyebrow. No, no. I will not give you my child. I will not disappear. And I will find out the truth. For the first time since she'd met him, Torren Hawthorne looked genuinely surprised. He studied her for a long moment, a predator reassessing its prey. Then he smiled again, that same chilling, empty smile. You have nothing, Katya, he said softly. You signed a prenuptial agreement that leaves you with exactly what you came with, which was nothing. You have no job. Your friends are my friends. Your family is... Where exactly? That brother you never speak to. You live in my home. You eat my food. You wear my clothes. You are nothing without me. Do not make the mistake of thinking you can fight me. It's a battle you will lose. Miserably. He finished his whiskey and placed the glass down with a decisive click. The offer stands until the day you give birth. Think carefully about your next move, because I will be thinking about mine. He walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the silence. But this time the silence was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the clarion call of war. He was right about one thing. She had a brother. A brother she hadn't spoken to in years because he'd seen the monster in Torren long before she had. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She scrolled through the contacts past the names of society wives and charity organizers until she found the one she was looking for, Liam Vance, her estranged, brilliant lawyer brother, her only hope. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding against her ribs. He answered on the second ring. Katya. His voice was full of surprise. They hadn't spoken since her wedding day when he'd pulled her aside and begged her not to marry Torren. He's a shark, Katya. He'll eat you alive. She had called him jealous and dramatic. Liam, she sobbed, the dam of her composure finally breaking. Liam, I need your help. You were right. You were right about everything. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. Katya. What's wrong? Where are you? Liam's voice had shed its surprise and was now sharp with concern. I'm at home. At the penthouse, she choked out between sobs. Liam, I'm in trouble. I'm pregnant and Torren. I'm on my way. He cut in. No hesitation. Don't say anything else over the phone. Are you safe right now? Is he there? He's here, but in his study. I'm okay for now. Lock your bedroom door. Don't talk to him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Just hang on, Katya. I'm coming. The line went dead. For the first time in hours, a tiny sliver of hope pierced through Katya's terror. Liam had always been her protector. Growing up, he was the one who'd patched up her scraped knees and stood up to bullies. He'd gone to Columbia Law while she'd pursued art history at NYU. Their paths diverged, but the bond had been unbreakable until Torren had systematically severed it, framing Liam's protectiveness as jealousy and disapproval of his wealth. He can't stand to see you happy, Katya, Torren had said, and she, a fool, had believed him. True to his word, 30 minutes later the intercom buzzed. It was the front desk. Mr. Hawthorne, a Mr. Liam Vance is here to see you. The doorman, of course, assumed Liam was here to see the man of the house. Torren's voice came over the internal speaker, cold and clipped. I'm not expecting a Mr. Vance. Send him away. Her blood ran cold. He was trying to isolate her completely. She grabbed her phone and texted Liam frantically. He won't let you up. He's trying to block me in. Liam's reply was almost instant. Go to the service elevator at the end of the hall. Now! Her heart hammered against her ribs. The service elevator was used by catering staff and maintenance. Torren would never think to monitor it. She slipped out of the living room, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floors. She could hear Torren on a phone call in his study, his voice a low, angry murmur. She crept down the long hallway past the gallery of curated art, her hand still protectively on her belly. The service elevator was utilitarian and stark. She jabbed the button and prayed. The doors slid open with a quiet hum, and there stood Liam. He looked older than she remembered. His sandy hair was a little shorter, and there were fine lines around his eyes. But those eyes were the same fiercely intelligent and full of a protective warmth that she suddenly realized she had been starved of for 3 years. He pulled her into a hug, and she clung to him, the sobs she'd been suppressing finally breaking free. "It's okay," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "I've got you. Let's get out of here." They rode the elevator down in silence. He led her out a back exit into a grimy alley she'd never known existed, a world away from the polished lobby of Park Avenue. The cold night air was a shock to her system. He hailed a yellow cab, and soon they were speeding away, the glittering lights of her prison shrinking in the distance. Liam's apartment in Greenwich Village was the complete antithesis of her penthouse. It was cluttered with books, legal pads, and a friendly-looking ficus tree. It smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt real. He sat her down on a worn leather sofa, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and made her a cup of tea. As she sipped the hot, sweet liquid, the story came tumbling out. She told him everything. The ultrasound, Torren's whisper, Dr. Sharma's revelation, the medical report which she'd had the presence of mind to shove into her purse, the horrifying confrontation, the gaslighting, Torren's ultimatum to take her baby and disappear. Liam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. He took the medical report and read it carefully, his lawyerly gaze missing nothing. When she was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. "That son of a bitch," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew he was a controlling bastard, but this is sociopathic." He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Katya, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "He's a master manipulator. He isolated me and I let him." Liam shook his head. "No more. That ends tonight. First things first, he can't force you to give up your child. Parental rights are not a commodity to be bought and sold. His threats are designed to terrorize you into submission. But he has so much power, Liam. The best lawyers, the judges. He told me he'd ruin Dr. Sharma." "He'll try," Liam said, his jaw tight. "But Dr. Sharma has ethics on her side, and a good lawyer, which I will make sure she has, can argue that her duty of care to you, a patient in clear distress, superseded her duty of confidentiality to him, especially when he was using that confidentiality to perpetrate fraud and emotional abuse." He started pacing his mind, clearly working. "The prenup is another issue. Torren's legal team is the best money can buy. They would have made it ironclad. He's right that you'd likely walk away with very little. But we're not going after his money. We're going for something more important, your freedom, your child, and the truth." He stopped and looked at her. "Katya, this is critical. You said you never cheated." "Never," she said with absolute conviction. "I believe you," he said immediately. "Which leaves a gaping hole in the middle of this. You are pregnant. He is sterile. He knew he was sterile. Yet he wasn't entirely surprised by the pregnancy. He was just angry it became public knowledge between you. He already had a plan to take the baby. This suggests he was expecting a child. Just not in this messy way." Her own thoughts, which had been a chaotic storm, began to clear as Liam laid them out with such logical precision. He was expecting a child. She repeated the idea, solidifying. "So, how?" "There are ways," Liam said, starting to list them on his fingers. "Surrogacy, for one. But you're the one who's pregnant, so that's out. Adoption possible, but the timeline doesn't fit. That leaves assisted reproductive technology. IVF. The acronym hung in the air. In vitro fertilization. But IVF, with what she asked, confused. His sperm is non-viable." "Exactly?" Liam said, his eyes gleaming with a hunter's intensity. It would have to be with donor sperm. But you would know if you went through an IVF cycle, Katya. The hormone injections, the procedures. You'd know. She shook her head. No, nothing like that ever happened. They were silent for a moment, both staring at the impossible puzzle. A pregnancy without intercourse with a fertile partner and without a clinical IVF procedure. It made no sense. Unless... Liam began slowly, his eyes narrowing. Unless the insemination happened without your knowledge. The blood drained from her face. What? How is that even possible? I don't know, he admitted. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. But with a man like Torren, a man with infinite resources and a complete lack of a moral compass, we can't rule anything out. We have to start thinking like he does. Where are the vulnerabilities? Where could he have intervened? He grabbed a legal pad and a pen. Okay, let's be systematic. Think back. Katya, any unusual medical appointments? Procedures? Even a routine checkup that felt off? Any new vitamins or medications he insisted you take? She racked her brain, replaying the last 9 months in her head. Torren was obsessed with their health, but she had always seen it as part of his controlling nature. He'd switched her gynecologist about a year ago to a private clinic. He'd vetted a place called the Westwood Wellness Clinic, run by a Dr. Lena Hansen. It was exclusive, expensive, and catered to the city's elite. She'd had her annual checkup there. There was my annual pap smear at the Westwood Clinic, she said slowly. About 9 months ago. It was routine. Dr. Hansen was very professional, very slick. Anything else? Torren started me on a new regimen of prenatal vitamins about a month before that, she recalled. He had them specially formulated by a compounding pharmacy in Switzerland. He said they were the purest, most effective ones available. Liam wrote it all down. Westwood Wellness Clinic. Dr. Lena Hansen. Swiss vitamins. He looked up at her. It's a long shot, Katya, but this is where we start digging. We need to find out who owns Westwood, who Dr. Hansen is connected to, and we need to get our hands on one of those vitamin bottles. He looked at the blanket draped over her, at her exhausted, tear-stained face. His expression softened. But first you need to rest. You're safe here. Torren doesn't know this address. I moved 3 years ago after the wedding. The unspoken words hung in the air after she chose him over her brother. Tomorrow, Liam said, his voice firm with resolve, we start fighting back, and our first objective is a strategic retreat. You can't go back to the penthouse. We need to get your essential belongings, your passport, your personal documents, anything of sentimental value. We have to do it fast before he realizes you've bolted and locks everything down. The thought of going back into that gilded cage, even for a moment, filled her with dread. But Liam was right. She couldn't let Torren erase every trace of her existence. He'll be at his office all morning, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He has a board meeting. He'll be gone from 8 a.m. to at least noon. Liam nodded. Okay, we have a 4-hour window. We go in, we get your things, and we get out. And then we disappear while I start digging into Mr. Torren Hawthorne's beautifully curated world. I have a feeling we're about to find some very ugly secrets hidden in the fine print. That night, huddled on Liam's sofa, Katya finally slept. It was a restless sleep, punctuated by nightmares of cold whispers and icy smiles. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone in the dark. She had an ally, and they had a plan. The great Torren Hawthorne had made a critical error. He had pushed her so far that she had nothing left to lose, and in doing so, he had transformed his polished, docile wife into an adversary. He had no idea the war he had just started. The next morning, the city was shrouded in a gray, determined drizzle that matched Katya's mood. Liam had already been up for hours, a pot of strong coffee brewing, his laptop open on the dining table, which was now command central. I did a preliminary search on the Westwood Wellness Clinic, he said, handing her a mug. It's a private entity owned by a holding company called Ethelred Capital. Very opaque. But I found something interesting. The listed agent for Ethelred is a law firm, Sloan, Finch & Associates. The name hit her like a jolt. Finch. The doctor who signed Torren's sterility report was Dr. Alistair Finch. Exactly, Liam said, his eyes glinting. It could be a coincidence, but in this world, I don't believe in them. It seems Dr. Finch didn't just diagnose Torren. He may have stayed in the family's orbit, or at least his firm did. The connection was chilling. The doctor who knew Torren's most profound secret was linked to the clinic where she had her last checkup before the pregnancy. It felt like a deliberate, carefully woven web. "We have to go," she said, her resolve hardening. "The clock is ticking." Liam had arranged for a discreet car service, not a yellow cab. "Torren will have eyes," he'd said. "Assume we're being watched." The journey back to Park Avenue was fraught with a new kind of terror. This wasn't her home anymore. It was enemy territory. She was a spy on a mission. As planned, Torren's Bentley was gone from the private garage. They used the service elevator again. Liam carried 2 large empty duffel bags. "Essentials only, Katya," he cautioned as they stepped into the silent, opulent foyer. "Documents, sentimental items, clothes you can't live without. Nothing he can track. Leave the jewelry he bought you. It's just another set of chains." The penthouse was eerily quiet. It was as if the argument from the night before had been sucked into the expensive upholstery, leaving behind a charged, toxic residue. While Liam stood watch at the door, Katya flew into action. She went straight to their bedroom, a vast space of cool grays and chrome that had always felt more like a hotel suite than a sanctuary. She grabbed her passport, her birth certificate, and a small box of old family photos from her bedside table. She packed jeans, sweaters, and sensible shoes, the clothes of the woman she used to be before Torren had dressed her up like a doll. She left the designer gowns and jewel-encrusted heels hanging in the closet like the shed skin of a former life. Then her eyes fell on the ensuite bathroom. On the marble countertop sat a sleek silver bottle. "Vie éternelle prenatal formula," the elegant script read. "Torren's specially compounded Swiss vitamins." Her heart pounded. She grabbed the bottle along with a sealed, unopened one from the medicine cabinet. This could be the proof they needed. Her final stop was Torren's study. It was a place she rarely entered, his sanctum sanctorum. The room was dark paneled in mahogany and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne. It was the heart of his empire and his secrets. "Katya, we need to go," Liam whispered from the doorway. "Just 1 minute," she said, her instincts screaming at her. She went behind his massive desk. She didn't know what she was looking for. His computer was password protected. But in his top desk drawer beneath a stack of neatly organized papers was a slim leather-bound folio. It wasn't a company document. It looked private. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The first page was a contract, a service agreement between Torren Hawthorne and a company she'd never heard of, the Genesis Clinic. Her eyes scanned the legalese until they landed on a phrase that made the air freeze in her lungs. "For services rendered in the procurement and cryopreservation of donor gametes." Donor gametes. Sperm. She flipped the page. It was a profile. A donor profile. Donor 734. It listed his physical characteristics: height, hair color, eye color, all remarkably similar to Torren's. It listed his academic achievements and a clean bill of health. But the name was redacted, blacked out with a thick marker. Then she saw the payment schedule, a series of large wire transfers from a private account of Torren's to the Genesis Clinic. And below that, a second set of payments. A monthly retainer paid to a woman, Serafina Dubois. The memo line for each payment was the same consulting fee. Who was Serafina Dubois? A consultant for what? And why was Torren paying a fertility clinic for donor sperm when he was supposedly trying to have a baby with his wife, Katya? Now Liam's voice was urgent. She snapped a picture of every page with her phone. her hands shaking so badly the first few were blurry. She shoved the folio back in the drawer and ran out of the study, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. As they were about to leave, the main elevator dinged. Her blood turned to ice. It couldn't be Torren. He was at his board meeting. The elevator doors slid open and a woman stepped out. She was in her late 60s, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, her silver hair styled in a flawless chignon. Her face was a mask of aristocratic disdain. It was Jessamine Hawthorne, Torren's mother. She surveyed the scene, Katja clutching a purse, Liam holding 2 duffel bags, and her thin lips curled into a semblance of a smile. It didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice as crisp and brittle as old money. "Leaving so soon, Katja? And with your brother, the little radical?" I see Torren's assessment of the situation was, as always, astute. Liam stepped in front of Katja protectively. "Mrs. Hawthorne, we're leaving." Jessamine's gaze swept over him dismissively before landing back on Katja. "Are you foolish little girl. Did you really think you could just walk away? Did you think my family would allow a complication like you to disrupt everything?" "This has nothing to do with you, Jessamine," Katja said, finding her voice. "Oh, but it has everything to do with me," she replied, taking a step closer. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's Joy, filled the air, a cloying, suffocating fragrance. A legacy is at stake. The Hawthorne name, my grandchild. Her eyes dropped to Katja's stomach and her expression softened into something that for a terrifying moment looked like warmth. "You don't have to run, dear. We can be reasonable. Torren is angry, yes. He is proud. But he can be managed. I can talk to him." She opened her handbag and pulled out a checkbook. "You are carrying a Hawthorne. That makes you important to us. But you are not equipped to be its mother. Give us the child. I will personally see to it that you are set up for life. A new name, a beautiful home in the south of France. Anything you desire. You can live out your days in comfort. All you have to do is sign the papers after the birth and walk away." It was the same offer Torren had made, but coated in a veneer of matriarchal concern that was somehow more repulsive. She wasn't just offering to buy the baby. She was offering Katja a golden cage in exchange for her soul. "He is not a Hawthorne," Katja said, her voice shaking with rage. "I don't know who he is, but he is not a Hawthorne, and he is my son. Mine. He is not for sale." Jessamine's mask of civility crumbled. Her face hardened, her eyes flashing with a venomous fury that was so much like her son's. "You ungrateful little tramp! You come into my son's life with nothing, and this is how you repay him, by opening your legs to some stranger and trying to pass off your bastard child as his." "That's enough," Liam said, his voice deadly calm. "We're done here." He took Katja's arm and steered her toward the service elevator. Jessamine's voice followed them down the hall, shrill and laced with panic. "You won't get away with this. Torren will find you. He will take that child from you, and he will leave you with nothing. You will be ruined. Do you hear me? Ruined." The service elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her tirade. Katja collapsed against the wall, trembling uncontrollably. She had known Torren was a monster, but now she knew the monstrosity was inherited. The entire Hawthorne family was rotten to the core. They didn't care about a child. They cared about an heir, a commodity. Back in the car, speeding away from that life for good, Katja showed Liam the photos on her phone. He scrolled through them, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The Genesis Clinic," he muttered. "Donor 734. Serafina Dubois." He looked up at her, his eyes dark with a chilling realization. "Katja, this is darker than we imagined. He wasn't just hiding his sterility. He had a plan, an elaborate premeditated plan to create an heir using a donor, and he was going to pass the child off as his own." "But how did I get pregnant?" she cried, the question still tormenting her. "If I didn't have IVF, how did the donor sperm?" Liam looked at the picture of the vitamin bottle, then back at the legal documents on the phone. "I don't know for sure," he said slowly, his voice grim. "But I have a sickening theory. It's called cryptic insemination. It's highly unethical, illegal in most places, and almost impossible to prove. But for a man with Torren's resources and connections to Dr. Finch's network and a private clinic, he wouldn't need your consent if he could bypass it entirely." The implication was horrifying. The vitamins from Switzerland. The private clinic. Dr. Hansen. Had her routine checkup been anything but? Had she been inseminated like livestock without her knowledge or consent? It was a violation so profound she couldn't wrap her mind around it. "Now we have a name." Liam said, his voice like steel. "Serafina Dubois. She's the key. We find her. We find out her role in all this. And we find out the identity of donor 734. He looked at Katya, his hand covering hers. "This is our new mission. We're not just escaping Katya. We're hunting." They went to ground, retreating to a secluded family cabin in the Catskills. The isolation was a balm to Katya's fractured nerves. While she focused on her health, Liam converted the rustic living room into a war room. He hired a sharp private investigator, an ex-cop named Marcus Thorne, who began charting the dark constellation of Torren's deceit, the doctors, the clinics, and the mysterious Serafina Dubois. The first breakthrough came from the unopened bottle of Swiss vitamins. Liam had it sent to a lab for analysis. The results were sickening. "It's worse than we thought," Liam said, his face grim as he read the report. The pills weren't just nutrients. They contained a powerful sedative and a cocktail of hormones designed to optimize fertility. The clinical words painted a horrifying picture. "He was drugging me," Katya whispered, the violation stealing her breath. She had been an unwilling participant in her own pregnancy. Her anger, once a spark, now hardened into cold, unbreakable resolve. Soon after Marcus Thorne's investigation bore fruit, the money trail laundered through shell corporations led him to Serafina Dubois. He found her address in a discreet Soho apartment building. "I have to see her," Katya declared, her voice firm. The time for hiding was over. They approached with caution. While Liam and Marcus waited nearby, Katya went to the building alone, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. She buzzed the apartment. "My name is Katya Hawthorne," she said into the intercom, her voice clear. "We need to talk about Torren." After a tense silence, the lock clicked open. The woman who answered the door. Serafina was not the cold accomplice Katya had envisioned. She was elegant, with intelligent, weary eyes that held a universe of regret. "Mrs. Hawthorne," she said softly, "I knew this day would come. Please come in." Inside the minimalist apartment, the truth finally spilled out. "I was a geneticist." Serafina began, her hands trembling. "I ran a fertility clinic called Genesis. Torren came to me years ago, obsessed with having a biological heir he knew he could never produce. When I told him it was impossible, he changed the plan. He wanted a child that appeared to be his, using a donor who was a perfect physical match. Donor 734. Katya breathed. Serafina nodded. But that wasn't enough for him. He insisted the child be carried by you to complete the illusion. I told him it was illegal, a monstrous ethical breach. But he had leveraged my brother's gambling debts. Torren paid them, and in return he owned me. He forced me to orchestrate everything. The drugged vitamins, the procedure. Dr. Hansen at the Westwood Clinic was one of his puppets, too. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. I've lived with this guilt every day. The confession was damning, but one final crucial question remained. Who was the donor? Katya asked, her voice trembling. Who is my baby's father? A fresh wave of fear washed over Serafina's face. Torren's cruelty has layers, she explained. He wanted the donor to be someone he could control completely, an insurance policy. He chose his younger brother, Michael. The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Michael Hawthorne, the disowned artist, the family disgrace. Torren despised him, Serafina whispered. He found Michael, offered him life-changing money to be the donor, and forced him to sign an NDA and disappear. It was his ultimate twisted victory to use the genetics of the brother he hated to create the heir he would raise as his own. Armed with Serafina's sworn affidavit, Liam's team moved swiftly. They located Michael Hawthorne living a quiet, anonymous life in a small town on the coast of Maine. He was a painter of melancholic seascapes, a man haunted by a deal he had never fully understood. Katja traveled to Maine to meet him. Standing on a wind-swept cliff overlooking the Atlantic, she saw a man who shared Torren's frame, but none of his menace. His eyes were kind. They were her baby's eyes. "I am so sorry," Michael said, his voice thick with regret. "I never knew." In that moment, standing beside the stranger, who was the biological father of her child, Katja felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. He was not a ghost. He was family. The final confrontation was not a dramatic showdown, but a swift legal execution. Liam presented Torren's lawyers with their arsenal: Serafina's testimony, the lab reports, Michael's statement, and the threat of criminal charges for assault and unlawful insemination. The story, if made public, would not just tarnish the Hawthorne name, it would obliterate the entire empire. Jessamine Hawthorne attempted a desperate smear campaign, but against the mountain of evidence it was useless. Faced with total ruin, Torren folded. The divorce was quiet and absolute. The fraudulent prenup was voided, and Katja accepted a settlement that would ensure her child's security. She refused to take a penny more of his blood money. Torren relinquished all paternal rights in exchange for their silence on Michael's identity, a final pathetic attempt to control a narrative he had already lost. Katja walked away from the marriage with her freedom, her dignity, and the precious life inside her. 2 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy boy. She named him Liam after the brother who had saved her, and gave him the last name Vance. He had his Uncle Michael's kind eyes and his mother's resilient spirit. Michael became a quiet, loving presence in their lives, his art slowly filling with a light that had long been absent. Katja never saw Torren or Jessamine again. The last she heard, Hawthorne Holdings was in turmoil, and Torren had become a recluse in his golden penthouse, a king ruling an empire of shadows. He had his legacy, but he was utterly alone, having lost the future he tried so desperately to steal. Katja, however, had found hers. It wasn't a life of opulence, but it was real, and it was free. Katja's journey started with a shocking betrayal in the cold, sterile light of an ultrasound room, and ended with her reclaiming her strength, her identity, and her future. She escaped a gilded cage, exposed a web of lies that ran deeper than she could ever have imagined, and fought for the most precious thing in her life, her child. Her story is a powerful testament to resilience, the unbreakable bond of family, and the fact that truth is a power that even a millionaire's money cannot suppress. What would you have done in Katja's position? Let us know in the comments below.
Millionaire takes mistress to wife's birthday party, but his pregnant wife makes a life-changing decision. A polished limousine idles outside the grand gates of the Harrington estate in Manhattan, its engine humming like an anxious heartbeat. On this crisp spring evening, a glamorous party unfolds inside, meant to celebrate the wife of multi-billionaire Alexander Harrington. Yet, as guests sip vintage champagne and gossip about the latest tabloids, a scandalous sight turns every head. The billionaire arrives not with his wife on his arm, but with a stunning young woman few recognize. Whispers ripple through the crowd, for Alexander's pregnant wife is still inside, oblivious to the social earthquake about to strike on her very own birthday. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to scandal. A charismatic entrepreneur known for his sweeping business conquests, he had always carried with him an air of insatiable ambition. The Harrington name was woven into the fabric of New York's high society. His philanthropic galas attracted major figures like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and even foreign dignitaries. He lived in a sprawling estate overlooking Central Park, a testament to his unimaginable wealth. For years, the public had lauded him for his confidence, generosity, and devilish smile. In private, however, there were darker rumors swirling, stories of backroom deals, hush money, and quiet heartbreaks. On the surface, Alexander's marriage to Clarissa Taylor Harrington was a picture of perfection. Clarissa, an Oxford-educated art historian, came from old money herself. Her father had bankrolled the expansions of major art museums across Europe. Photographs in the tabloids and glossy magazines featured Clarissa's radiant smile and Alexander's unwavering arm around her shoulders. They were the golden couple who seemed to have it all: the looks, the lineage, the wealth. They graced the covers of lifestyle publications, donating substantial sums to children's hospitals and educational initiatives. Clarissa often accompanied Alexander to high-stakes business meetings, proving herself as a formidable negotiator. Anyone who saw them in those early days believed they were unstoppable together. Yet success came with a cost. Before long, Alexander began to distance himself from Clarissa. He poured himself into building Harrington Global, a conglomerate that spanned tech investments, real estate, and environmental solutions. Late nights in the office, trips overseas to broker major deals, and social events that Clarissa wasn't invited to became routine. Despite her growing suspicions, Clarissa tried to remain supportive, especially when she discovered she was pregnant. She planned to surprise Alexander with the news at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish gathering where she hoped they could reconnect in front of their closest friends and family. As the big night approached, the house buzzed with preparations. Lavish flower arrangements arrived in waves, filling the mansion with the scent of white orchids and subtle honeysuckle. Crystal chandeliers were polished to a sparkling sheen. The catering team meticulously planned a 12-course meal featuring delicacies flown in from around the world. Clarissa's father, Winston Taylor, personally ensured that the guest list was curated with dignitaries, celebrities, and old family friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alexander was finishing up a secret dinner at an exclusive Michelin-star restaurant with a woman named Sophia de la Cruz. Sophia had entered his life barely a year ago as a marketing consultant. Young, ambitious, and undeniably captivating, she had quickly become more than just a professional acquaintance. Alexander found himself enthralled by her energy and fresh perspective. Their bond deepened behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi's watchful eyes. Like a siren's call, Sophia offered the excitement that Alexander felt he was missing. She encouraged his most extravagant desires and made him feel invincible. That night, while Clarissa went over last-minute arrangements for her birthday party, Alexander decided to invite Sophia. It was a decision born of arrogance, fueled by the high that came from believing he could control any situation. How could there be any repercussions, he reasoned. He was Alexander Harrington, after all, a man who shaped the narrative. He believed the world danced to his tune. Little did he know, the stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. Clarissa's birthday party shimmered with the promise of a memorable evening. The estate's grand ballroom was alight with crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across the polished marble floors. Velvet draped tables were topped with elegant centerpieces of orchids, peonies, and flickering gold candles. A string quartet performed in a corner, their music weaving seamlessly through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Clarissa, dressed in a flowing silk gown that draped delicately over her growing bump, greeted each guest with warmth. Though her pregnancy was a secret to most, the subtle curvature of her abdomen gave hints of the new life stirring within her. She planned to share the joyful announcement. That night, her father was to toast her birthday. Then she would offer the news, hoping to see the stunned but happy expression on Alexander's face. Among the attendees were several notable figures. Her father, Winston, who stood proud in a tailored navy suit, fashion icon Isabella Quinn, who had designed Clarissa's gown, real estate mogul Kenton Cross, and even the mayor of New York City, who had come to pay tribute to the Harringtons. Conversations swirled around potential deals, philanthropic endeavors, and the latest headlines. Yet, a peculiar restlessness hung in the air. It was as if the entire estate sensed an unspoken tension. About an hour into the festivities, a hush began to spread from the entrance. People craned their necks toward the foyer where Alexander had just arrived. He stood tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a manner reminiscent of old Hollywood stars. But it wasn't Alexander's arrival that captured everyone's shock. It was the presence of the woman on his arm, Sophia de la Cruz, in a figure-hugging red gown that shimmered with sequins, walked with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the room. Heads turned as she stepped forward, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk. She seemed well aware of the spotlight that fell upon her. Though many recognized her from social media posts and marketing conferences, they struggled to comprehend why she was here at Clarissa's birthday celebration, especially in such an intimate capacity. Confusion and whispers rippled among the guests. Some glanced toward Clarissa, who, from across the room, locked eyes with her husband. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. She froze momentarily, gripping the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that it nearly shattered. The unthinkable had happened. Alexander had not only chosen to bring Sophia to the party, he had done so brazenly, in full public view. Clarissa felt her cheeks flush with a blend of rage and humiliation. This was supposed to be her special night, and she had spent weeks meticulously organizing every detail. The sting was unbearable. Before she could fully process her shock, Winston hurried to her side, quietly asking what was going on. She shook her head, unable to offer an answer. Alexander attempted to mask any awkwardness with a broad, confident grin. He guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom as though nothing was amiss. Some guests, loyal to Clarissa, turned away in disgust or disapproval. Others, ever the opportunists, flocked to greet the new arrival, eager to glean inside information. Moments later, a hush once again fell over the crowd as Alexander approached Clarissa. They stood face to face. Sophia hovered just behind him like a sinister shadow. "Happy birthday, darling," Alexander said, leaning in to place a perfunctory kiss on Clarissa's cheek. His words felt as cold as the tension they generated. The air crackled. An uncertain hush befell the entire ballroom. Clarissa's emotions collided, anger, hurt, and betrayal swirling into a perfect storm. She felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to allow them to fall. Not here, not surrounded by these people. Summoning the composure that had been drilled into her since birth, she merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Alexander stepped aside, and Sophia stepped forward, offering a polite, "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Clarissa. I've heard so much about you." Clarissa could barely bring herself to respond. Likewise, she managed, a single word laced with tension. Though outwardly the exchange appeared cordial, everyone in proximity sensed the electric undertones. Clarissa's father, feeling his daughter's silent plea, quickly took the microphone to begin the evening's formal toasts. The dinner was about to begin, and beneath the veneer of elegant conversation and polished smiles, a storm of betrayal brewed. The banquet hall glowed under candlelight, each course served by a fleet of uniformed waitstaff moving with practiced precision. Crystal glasses tinkled softly as servers poured top-shelf wine. Guests engaged in polite chit-chat at the round tables, though their eyes often wandered back to the triangle forming among Clarissa, Alexander, and Sophia. Clarissa sat at the head table, flanked by Winston on one side and Alexander on the other. Sophia was positioned uncomfortably close, just a seat away from Alexander. The arrangement had been made long before the identity of Alexander's guest had been revealed. Clarissa's mother had assumed Alexander would bring a business associate or perhaps a friend, never suspecting the truth. Tension hung thick in the air. Clarissa struggled to keep her posture upright, silently pleading for the night to pass quickly. She could feel the soft flutter of her baby within her, a gentle reminder of the delicate life she was fighting to protect. She forced a smile every time a guest raised a toast to her. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. Why did Alexander do this? How could he be so cruel? Halfway through dinner, Winston rose from his seat to give a formal birthday speech for his daughter. By then, a hush fell over the chatter as everyone turned their attention to the proud father. I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a beautiful, accomplished woman, Winston began, his voice filled with affection. She has brought light into this family with her passion for art, her compassionate heart, and her unwavering loyalty. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to Clarissa, who has never ceased to amaze me. Happy birthday, my dear. Applause reverberated around the room, but Clarissa found herself trembling. She had planned to make her big announcement during the speech's aftermath, but the presence of Sophia made her question everything. Should she still reveal her pregnancy now? Should she keep it secret a while longer? Her internal debate was cut short when Winston nodded for Clarissa to stand. Summoning her courage, she placed a hand over her tummy, the other gripping her champagne flute. A trembling breath escaped her lips. Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight. 1. I have a little surprise to share with everyone. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Alexander, whose expression was unreadable. Sophia was watching intently, almost hungrily, like a spectator waiting for the next act of a play. Clarissa mustered her composure and announced, I'm expecting a baby. Alexander and I are going to have our first child. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by applause from well-wishers. Many guests, unaware of the undercurrents, rose to congratulate her. Winston embraced his daughter, tears glistening in his proud eyes. Alexander, for his part, feigned a smile. He leaned over to Clarissa and brushed a quick kiss on her cheek, whispering, You might have told me sooner. It was a cutting remark, delivered in the presence of dozens of curious onlookers. Clarissa's heart clenched. She had expected a look of joy, or at least a flicker of genuine excitement, but all she found was mild annoyance. Even so, she endured the subsequent flood of well-wishers, politely accepting their hugs and handshakes. Meanwhile, she caught glimpses of Sophia's face, which remained surprisingly composed. There was no overt jealousy or shock, just an eerie calm that sent chills down Clarissa's spine. When dessert was served, a decadent 3-tier chocolate confection, the festive atmosphere had dimmed. Clarissa attempted to maintain conversations with guests, but found her mind drifting. She watched Alexander and Sophia from the corner of her eye, noticing how often he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, and how she laughed quietly in return. It felt as though Clarissa had been cast as a minor character in her own celebration. The humiliation was impossible to ignore, yet beneath her hurt lay an unexpected ripple of resolve. This is my child, and I will not let Alexander's reckless behavior overshadow that. She pressed a hand against her still-growing belly. One thing was becoming clear: her future and her babies could no longer rest solely in Alexander's hands. After dinner, guests mingled in the expansive lounge area, sipping espresso and enjoying after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble took the stage, their smooth melodies drifting through the corridors. Several high-profile attendees began to make discreet exits, though many lingered, perhaps hoping to witness whatever spectacle might unfold. Clarissa stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames offering fleeting warmth in a room that felt increasingly cold. She was trying to console herself with small talk alongside her longtime friend, Isabella Quinn. Isabella, a notable fashion designer, had been privy to Clarissa's suspicions for months. She knew how desperately Clarissa had clung to the hope of restoring her marriage. Now, the sight of Sophia's brazen presence threatened to shatter Clarissa's composure. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her eyes flicking to Alexander across the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. "I'm not sure. I feel humiliated, but also strangely liberated." Isabella nodded. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Clarissa could reply, Alexander approached them, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said, placing a cursory hand on Clarissa's shoulder, "I'm going to step outside to talk business for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Clarissa eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Alexander scowled. "Don't start, Clarissa. Not now." He turned on his heel, leaving Clarissa with Isabella, her question unanswered. Clarissa felt a surge of anger at his dismissiveness. In front of dozens of guests and the press, he had effectively shoved aside her feelings on her own birthday. Minutes later, Clarissa noticed Sophia slip through a side door that led toward the garden terrace. Curiosity and a growing sense of indignation fueled her to follow. She excused herself from Isabella and made her way through the throng of guests, slipping out into the cool night air. The garden was beautifully landscaped, accented by floodlights illuminating carefully trimmed hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood silent guard amidst the greenery. Clarissa found Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "So," Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you decided to come to my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up. Instead of surprise or guilt, she merely offered a pitying smile. "Alexander insisted I come. He said it was important for us to be seen together." Clarissa felt the urge to snap back, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Tell me, does it bother you at all that he's married and expecting a child?" Sophia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Alexander and I, we have something real. He made it clear your relationship was falling apart. I never thought you'd be pregnant." Clarissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She wondered how long Alexander had carried on these lies, painting her as some distant, loveless wife. Every syllable from Sophia's mouth fed Clarissa's fury. "Did he tell you that I was distant because he was never home?" Clarissa fired back, her voice shaking. "That I stopped trusting him because he kept secrets? You may think you have something real, but let me tell you, Alexander's version of truth is as malleable as clay." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's different with me. I'm not here to fight you, Clarissa. I just came because he asked me to." A sudden wave of nausea swelled within Clarissa, anger and heartbreak roiling together. She pressed a hand over her belly, inhaling slowly to calm herself. The last thing she wanted was to faint or cause a scene that might harm her baby. "No, you're not here to fight," Clarissa said. "But you're playing a dangerous game. Remember, the man who cheats with you can cheat on you just as easily." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but the tension was shattered by the sound of footsteps. They both turned to see Winston stepping into the garden, worry etched across his features. "Clarissa, are you all right?" Clarissa straightened her posture. "I'm fine, Father." The older man looked between Clarissa and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation in progress. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was a coldness in Winston's eyes as he addressed Sophia. Miss Dela Cruz, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter." Sophia hesitated, then gracefully slid past them and back into the mansion. Once she was gone, Winston took Clarissa's hand. "This is unacceptable," he murmured. "I won't stand by and watch my daughter be humiliated." Clarissa exhaled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. "I know, but I need time to think, Father. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby." Winston pulled her into a gentle embrace, the garden's stillness enveloping them. "I'll support whatever decision you make." And as the moonlight bathed them in its glow, Clarissa realized she was at a crossroads. One path led back inside to Alexander, to their marriage, to the heartbreak. The other path remained uncertain, but it offered a hope for dignity and independence that she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after most guests had gone home, the Harrington estate finally settled into an uneasy silence. The staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of the lavish party, collecting empty champagne flutes and disposing of flower arrangements that had begun to wilt under the harsh light. Clarissa retreated to her bedroom suite, feeling a lifetime older than she had at the start of the night. She slipped off her silk gown, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now that she no longer wore a loose dress. She ran her hand across her abdomen, feeling the comforting presence of her unborn child. "Is this how I want to raise you?" she thought, "in a household where your father disrespects me so openly?" Down the hall, the door to Alexander's study was slightly ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, accompanied by the faint aroma of whiskey. Clarissa took a deep breath and walked toward it, determined to confront him, but also to keep her emotions in check. She found Alexander behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when she entered. "Clarissa," he greeted, though his voice lacked warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "What you did tonight was humiliating," she began, her voice a subdued tremor. "On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here?" Alexander rubbed his temples, exhaling. "Look, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But you've known our relationship has been strained for a long time. Sophia is part of my life now." Clarissa bristled. "And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." A flicker of guilt flickered in his eyes, then vanished. "I know that," he said tersely, "but you've made no attempt to support me in my ventures. You constantly criticize my absences, my business expansions, my choices." Clarissa stared at him in disbelief. "Because you constantly push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you vanish on another business trip or stay out late with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself?" He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand before her. She realized how tired he looked, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a man under pressure. Yet sympathy was hard to muster when she remembered Sophia's smug presence. "I'm under tremendous stress," Alexander said, pacing the length of the room. "We're finalizing an international deal with the Saudis. I have a board meeting next week that could make or break the new technology division. And now we have a baby on the way, something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to everyone tonight." Clarissa's anger flared again. "I planned to tell you privately, but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal, let alone a meaningful conversation." Alexander rested his hands on the back of an ornate chair, letting out a long breath. "I can't do this right now." She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "If you won't choose to be a husband and father, then I'll make a choice for myself and this child." Her words hung in the air like a distant thunderclap. Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Clarissa said, her voice firmer now, "I'm considering leaving. I can't endure this spectacle. Not for me, and not for our baby." Alexander's face paled, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Clarissa realized she had made her decision. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like a trophy wife while he flaunted his affair in her face. Without waiting for his reply, she turned on her heel and left the study. Her steps echoed in the corridor, each one a resolute stride toward whatever future she would create away from this toxic environment. In her bedroom, Clarissa shut the door and rested her back against it. She felt a swirl of emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but also an unexpected sense of freedom. She was done pretending everything was fine, done playing the role of the compliant wife while her husband publicly undermined her. Tomorrow, the press would likely run scandalous headlines. Social media might explode with speculation, but tonight, as she placed a protective hand over her unborn child, Clarissa felt a calm resolve. She would not be defined by Alexander's betrayal. She would forge her own path, even if she had to go through heartbreak to find it. The next morning arrived with a clamor of news vans outside the estate's gates. Word had leaked from the party, perhaps from a staff member or an opportunistic guest, about the shocking drama. A billionaire husband bringing his mistress to his pregnant wife's birthday celebration. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story, hungry for exclusive interviews or even a single photograph that captured the tension. Clarissa awoke to the sounds of muffled shouting below her window. She peered through the curtains and saw a small crowd of reporters, cameras at the ready. Her heart sank at the spectacle. She had grown up under the public's gaze, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She prepared herself for the day with steady determination. Slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she summoned the household staff and informed them. She would handle any necessary statements herself. She then called her personal lawyer, Margaret Lee, a formidable mind in family law. "Margaret," Clarissa said when the call connected, "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated. Alexander has openly brought another woman into our marriage, and I need to protect myself and my baby." Margaret's calm voice offered reassurance. "We can discuss your options: prenups, child custody, financial support, property division. The media storm will be intense, but we can manage it. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please." Clarissa exhaled. "I'd like to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later." Alexander, meanwhile, had already left the estate for his office, avoiding the reporters gathered outside. Clarissa suspected he'd do damage control from behind a conference table, likely spinning a narrative that made him appear the victim of marital discord. His statement would undoubtedly gloss over his blatant betrayal, focusing instead on their incompatibilities. Clarissa was determined not to be caught off guard by his rhetoric. By mid-morning, Margaret Lee arrived, carefully navigating her way through the reporters. She was a short, impeccably dressed woman who exuded both warmth and steely resolve. They sat together in the sunlit parlor, far from prying ears. "Clarissa, the first question is, do you intend to remain married?" Margaret asked, pulling out a notepad. Clarissa took a long moment to consider. Memories flashed through her mind: her wedding day, the joy they once shared, the nights spent discussing dreams for the future, and the gradual drift into secrecy and lies. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't see a way forward with Alexander. He's made it clear he's invested in someone else. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability." Margaret nodded, jotting notes. "Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement does entitle you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Alexander can't manipulate his financials." Clarissa's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. "And the baby? I want to make sure custody is clarified." Margaret's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. "We'll arrange for shared custody, though you can request primary custody if you can prove it's in the child's best interest." Given Alexander's public behavior, it shouldn't be too difficult. They spent the next hour outlining a plan, reviewing documents, and strategizing how to handle the inevitable media onslaught. Winston joined them midway, offering both emotional support and financial resources. Clarissa felt a surge of gratitude for her father's unwavering presence. Despite everything, she was not alone. As Margaret departed, Clarissa steeled herself to face the reporters outside. She stepped out onto the front steps of the estate, her father by her side. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Microphones jostled for position as frenzied voices called out her name. Clarissa raised a hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions. All I can say is that Alexander Harrington and I are dealing with personal matters, and my primary concern is the well-being of my unborn child." "Are you divorcing Mr. Harrington?" a reporter shouted. Clarissa paused, meeting the cacophony of eyes and lenses head-on. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options. That's all I can share for now." She turned to leave, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions. Though her heart pounded, she felt a newfound sense of courage. This was the beginning of her own narrative one, where she would no longer be overshadowed by Alexander's towering presence. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her. Clarissa's resolve crystallized. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the little life growing within her. The drama had only begun, but Clarissa was ready to fight for her future. Across town, in the Harrington Global headquarters, Alexander paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was laser-focused on the crisis at hand. "You promised me this merger would go smoothly," he barked into the phone. "Now the board is panicking because of the media circus around my personal life. I need a statement from PR immediately." On the other end of the line was Harrington Global's chief communications officer, a man named Bradley Swain. He attempted to maintain professionalism despite Alexander's aggressive tone. "We have a draft statement ready to go. However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your spouse. The tabloids are having a field day with the rumors." Alexander exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Clarissa's not cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak with me." Bradley's hesitation was evident. "With all due respect, if you and Miss S. Harrington appear combative, it could harm the company's public image even more. The board wants stability." Alexander slammed a fist onto his desk. "If the board is so concerned, they can remember how much Harrington Global owes to my leadership. Get the statement ready." He hung up abruptly and sank into his leather chair. His reflection in the polished surface of the desk stared back at him, a man who prided himself on control, now embroiled in a scandal that was spiraling out of his hands. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, presumably from Sophia and from other acquaintances wanting clarity or, worse, gossip. Just then, Kenton Cross knocked on the open door. A long-time associate in real estate, Kenton had been invited to the birthday party fiasco and had witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Alexander," Kenton remarked, seating himself across from the desk. "The business community is whispering about whether you can handle your personal life, let alone these billion-dollar deals." Alexander bristled. "I know how to manage my personal affairs. The tabloids will move on once something else catches their attention." Kenton folded his arms, eyeing Alexander critically. "And your wife? She looks serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? I've been poring over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options. Kenton shook his head. But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Clarissa. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, you'll be painted as the callous husband who flaunted his mistress. You might win the merger, but you'll lose the court of public opinion, and that can hurt your bottom line in the long run. Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a headache bloom behind his eyes. So what do you suggest? Speak to her, Kenton replied evenly. Come to an arrangement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more critical than stroking your ego. Alexander glared at him, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, stakeholder confidence, and the allure of success. The scandal was tarnishing that aura. Stocks had already dipped slightly, and rumors swirled of potential investors pulling out. After Kenton left, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia. He stared at the screen, weighing whether to answer. Finally he picked up. What do you need? He asked curtly. Sophia's voice was soft. I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a home wrecker, saying all sorts of things online. He sighed heavily. It'll blow over. Don't respond to them. There was a brief pause. And us? Where do we stand if Clarissa files for divorce? Alexander's mind reeled. He pictured his future, either losing massive chunks of his estate in a bitter divorce or fighting Clarissa in court. Neither option seemed appealing. I don't know, he finally admitted. I need time to think. He ended the call without a proper goodbye, tossing his phone onto the desk. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain, cornered. The carefully curated life he'd built was crumbling, his company threatened by rumor, his marriage on the brink, and his mistress already demanding reassurances. The unstoppable Alexander Harrington was suddenly at a loss. Yet even in this low moment, a flicker of stubborn pride coursed through him. He hadn't fought his way to the top to be taken down by gossip and scandal. I can handle this, he told himself. I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top. Over the following week, the media frenzy grew to epic proportions. Magazine covers screamed headlines like Harrington's double life and billionaire's mistress crashes. Pregnant wife's birthday. Talk shows dissected every available crumb of information, inviting body language experts to analyze clips from the birthday party. Social media lit up with hashtags pitting hashtag Team Clarissa against hashtag Team Alexander, although the vast majority appeared to rally around Clarissa. Feeling cornered, Alexander's PR team issued a formal statement. Mr. and Miss S. Harrington are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition. The statement, however, did little to quell the speculation. Rumors surfaced that Clarissa was preparing to file for divorce citing adultery, which carried heavy implications for Alexander's standing in certain conservative business circles. Clarissa maintained a dignified silence, refusing interviews. She entrusted her father Winston to handle any urgent press inquiries, while her lawyer Margaret readied the necessary legal documents. The Harrington estate turned into a fortress, gates closed, security heightened, and staff under strict instructions to turn away all outsiders. Still, life had to continue. Clarissa, who once curated art shows, found herself diving into a new project, a children's arts charity event, something she hoped to do in honor of her baby. She threw herself into philanthropic efforts as a way to cope with her emotional turmoil. Each day brought fresh heartbreak whenever she remembered the betrayal, but she also felt a growing excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn paid frequent visits, offering both creative input on the charity event and emotional support. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and began planning a gala that would bring attention to arts programs for underprivileged youth. Clarissa found a renewed sense of purpose in this project. She might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in making the world a better place. Meanwhile, Alexander fought on the business front. The prospective merger he'd been touting was now at risk. Foreign investors hesitated to link their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even so, he soldiered on with negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees. He also hired a high-powered legal team to mount a defense in the likely divorce proceedings. His lawyers tried various tactics, sending documents that questioned Clarissa's mental state, insinuating she might be unstable due to pregnancy hormones. It was a ruthless strategy designed to protect Alexander's assets and hamper her claims in court. When Clarissa received those documents, she felt physically ill. The insinuation that she was mentally compromised due to pregnancy was more than just an insult. It was a direct threat to her credibility as a prospective mother. Margaret quickly drafted a sharp rebuttal, warning Alexander's team that any further slander would be met with defamation suits. In quieter moments, Clarissa felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as she grieved the happy future she once envisioned with Alexander. But each time, she reminded herself of the new life growing inside her, the gentle flutters that reminded her she was no longer alone. That simple fact fueled her resolve. On day 8 of the media onslaught, Clarissa received a personal phone call from an unexpected ally, Catherine Lyons, a renowned talk show host with a reputation for championing women's rights. Clarissa answered hesitantly. "Clarissa," Catherine said in a soothing tone, "I'd like to invite you for an interview, no gimmicks. Just a chance for you to speak your truth, if you're ready." Clarissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to remain silent, to guard her privacy. But the other part, a growing part, recognized that telling her side of the story might turn the tide in her favor, and possibly set the record straight about her pregnancy, her plans, and her dignity. "I'll consider it," Clarissa answered. "Give me some time." She ended the call, realizing she stood at another crossroads. A public interview could be a powerful weapon in this media war, a chance to reveal Alexander's manipulations without stooping to his legal team's level. Yet it also meant exposing her vulnerabilities before millions of viewers. As she paced the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, Clarissa gently rested a hand on her belly. "Whatever path I choose," she whispered to her child, "I promise it'll be one that leads us to a life of love and respect." And so the battle lines were drawn. Alexander might have commanded armies of lawyers and PR experts, but Clarissa had discovered a deeper strength within herself. The stage was set for the next crucial act of their unfolding drama, the moment she would decide whether to stand in the public eye and reclaim her narrative or stay quiet and let the scandal define her. Clarissa ultimately accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The idea of publicly exposing her pain both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were clear. The chance to correct the rumor mill, to assert her agency, and to make known her intentions for her child's future. After consulting with Margaret and Winston, she agreed to a carefully orchestrated, sit-down interview in a private, tasteful setting, a neutral location that felt neither intrusive nor contrived. On the evening of the interview, Clarissa arrived at Catherine's production studio, which had been converted into a warm, living room-like set. Soft lighting framed 2 comfortable armchairs positioned opposite one another. A small floral arrangement and a table with glasses of water separated them. Off-camera, a minimal crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring the microphone levels were correct and the cameras were rolling smoothly. Catherine greeted Clarissa with a warm hug, whispering, "Remember, you're in control. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Clarissa nodded. She took a steadying breath and settled into her chair, clad in a modest, elegant dress. She appeared every bit the poised socialite, except for the vulnerability in her eyes, which revealed the depth of her turmoil. Once the countdown ended, Catherine opened the interview. "Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Clarissa Taylor Harrington, who's found herself in the eye of a media storm involving her marriage to billionaire Alexander Harrington. Clarissa, thank you for being here." Clarissa offered a polite smile. "Thank you for having me, Catherine." Catherine leaned in with genuine concern. "You've remained largely silent since the reports emerged of Alexander's affair. Why choose to speak now?" Clarissa folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. "This past week has been overwhelming. I've been hounded by paparazzi, and my family's privacy has been invaded. But I've also realized that silence allows others to control the narrative. I want people to understand that I am not just Alexander Harrington's wife. I am my own person, and I have my own story." Catherine nodded, leaning forward. "I understand you're expecting your first child with Alexander. How has that impacted your decisions?" A gentle hand drifted to Clarissa's stomach. "Enormously. Becoming a mother changed my perspective on what I'm willing to endure. I realized I can't raise my child in a home filled with deceit. That's not the environment I want for them." Catherine's gaze was sympathetic. "What do you say to those who argue that marital problems should be resolved in private?" Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. "Normally I'd agree. But when someone brings their mistress to your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it's no longer a private matter. It's humiliating, and it forces you to respond. And the media, well, they thrive on sensational stories." Catherine's tone turned more serious. "The rumor mill suggests you're seeking divorce. Is that true?" A flicker of emotion crossed Clarissa's face. "Yes, I'm filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Alexander's affair. It isn't the only problem we've had, but it's the final straw." The studio fell silent as the gravity of her words settled. Catherine glanced at her notes, then chose her next question carefully. "There have been allegations from Alexander's legal team that you're emotionally unstable due to your pregnancy. How do you respond?" Clarissa's eyes hardened. "I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, that's a common tactic to discredit women, especially pregnant women. I'm under a doctor's care, and I'm perfectly capable of making rational decisions. If anything, pregnancy has made me more clear about what I want in life." Catherine nodded, then leaned back with a soft smile. "What do you envision for your future and your child's?" For a moment, Clarissa's features softened. "I want a peaceful life, filled with love, where my child can grow up knowing respect and kindness. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and I hope that my child will one day be proud of the person I've become." The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine praising Clarissa's courage. "Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability tonight. I'm sure your story will resonate with many who faced similar betrayals." Clarissa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt free, having shared her truth on her own terms. The cameras powered down, and Catherine stood to hug her again, whispering, "You are amazing. Stay strong." By the time Clarissa emerged from the studio, she found Winston waiting for her. He gently took her arm. "Proud of you, my girl," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Clarissa managed a weak smile. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" Winston nodded, guiding her toward the waiting car. "Yes, but at least now, you're writing your own story." She climbed into the vehicle, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere in the labyrinth of skyscrapers stood Alexander, likely watching the interview and scrambling for his next move. But for Clarissa, the course was set. No longer a silent victim, she embraced this new chapter with resolve. Whatever awaited, she wouldn't face it as the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's arrogance. She was a mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future with every ounce of courage she had. Alexander did indeed watch the interview from his penthouse apartment. The crisp, modern furnishings offered little comfort as Clarissa's words sank in. She had confirmed the divorce publicly, exposing his affair in a calm, dignified manner that made him seem like a heartless villain. His phone vibrated incessantly with texts and calls, business partners, board members, friends, and even Sophia. He finally answered Sophia's call. "Did you watch it?" he asked, voice taut. "I did," Sophia replied. "It's not good for you, Alexander. Public sympathy is with Clarissa. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're—" She trailed off, as if reluctant to finish the sentence. Alexander ground his teeth. "I'm what, Sophia?" she sighed. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is destroying you. The board might oust you if the stocks continue to dip." A hot flush of panic coursed through Alexander, though he struggled to maintain composure. "I can't be ousted from my own company. I control the majority shares." "Yes, but if confidence in you drops enough, they might find a way. You've made some enemies on the board over the years." Alexander inhaled sharply, recalling the tense board meetings where he'd forced through expansions, ignoring cautionary advice. Perhaps those resentments now had fertile ground to grow. "So you're saying I should apologize publicly? Backtrack?" Sophia hesitated. "Maybe. Or paint Clarissa as manipulative. If you let her narrative stand uncontested, you'll lose. You need to fight back." The idea churned in Alexander's gut. His pride rebelled against apologizing, but he also feared the destructive potential of Clarissa's public image. "I'll speak with my PR team," he said curtly, ending the call. Within an hour, Alexander convened an emergency meeting with Bradley Swain and a team of crisis management experts. They sat around his long glass table, laptops open, phone lines buzzing. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley began, clearing his throat. "The interview has galvanized public support for Clarissa. She's being hailed as a role model for women standing up against infidelity. We need to refocus the narrative on your business achievements, your philanthropic efforts. Remind people who you are outside of this scandal." One of the crisis managers chimed in. "Alternatively, we can release a counter-statement accusing Miss S. Harrington of withholding the pregnancy from you, arguing she used it as leverage. That angle might shift some blame her way." Alexander scowled, recalling how Clarissa had tried to inform him, but was met with his own negligence. "That might be thin," he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. "But we can't just let her run away with this." Bradley hesitated, then spoke softly. "Alexander, maybe you need to consider a genuine apology. Public contrition could do wonders. A show of remorse. A vow to continue supporting Clarissa and the child financially, no matter what." Alexander's pride warred with the rational part of his mind. He loathed the thought of appearing weak. Apologies were for those who admitted they were wrong, and in his eyes, Clarissa bore some responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But the alternative, an all-out battle, might irreparably damage his empire. "Draft a statement," he finally conceded, tension visible in his clenched jaw. "Frame it as me regretting how events unfolded, reaffirm my commitment to the child, and mention I hope Clarissa and I can come to amicable terms." Bradley nodded, relief evident on his face. "We'll have it ready by morning." As the team filed out, Alexander remained in his chair, staring at the city lights. Amicable terms, he thought, recalling the legal documents accusing Clarissa of emotional instability. Those had been his lawyer's idea, but he hadn't protested. He knew it would likely anger her further. How did it all come to this? His mind drifted to memories of Clarissa, once bright, playful, engaging. Their early dates in Paris, spontaneous trips to the Caribbean, and dinners where they'd talk late into the night about their shared dreams. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment their relationship frayed. Perhaps it had been a series of small betrayals, neglected conversations, growing distances. Now, they stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps Clarissa wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her face during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. But the fleeting remorse clashed with anger. Her going public felt like an ambush, leaving him cornered. He pushed down whatever empathy he'd felt and resolved to win, no matter the cost. If Clarissa wanted war, he'd fight with every tool at his disposal. Days turned into another week. Clarissa's interview aired worldwide, generating impassioned debates. Donations to her charity soared, while Alexander's once gleaming reputation took blow after blow. Stockholders of Harrington Global expressed discomfort in private meetings, and rumors persisted that the board was exploring contingencies should Alexander's public image compromise the company's stability. Clarissa remained sequestered at the estate, focusing on her health and the charity event. Despite the hailstorm of sensational headlines, she found pockets of peace reading, journaling, painting. She even began designing a nursery, selecting soft pastel hues and whimsical animal murals, determined to provide a nurturing environment for her child. Alexander, however, escalated his counteroffensive. His lawyers filed motions claiming Clarissa had deliberately withheld news of her pregnancy to manipulate him. He declined a direct interview, but released a video statement where he appeared remorseful, yet subtly blamed marital discord on Clarissa's lack of supportive understanding of his business pressures. The statement earned mixed reactions. Some found it sincere, others labeled it damage control. Late one afternoon, Clarissa heard the echo of raised voices downstairs. She emerged from her room to see Winston arguing with a man in a tailored suit, one of Alexander's lawyers. Margaret Lee stood close by, her expression mirroring Winston's anger. "Clarissa, they've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, exasperation in her voice. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Clarissa stiffened. "Is Alexander here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." Clarissa accepted the paperwork, scanning the legal jargon that essentially questioned her entitlement to portions of the estate, claiming she abandoned the marriage. It also criticized her for public defamation, claiming that the interview painted Alexander in a damaging light. She felt her blood run cold. "That's enough," Winston growled, turning to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Lee." The lawyer bowed stiffly and departed. Clarissa closed the door behind him, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not letting up." Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." Later that evening, Clarissa locked herself in her bedroom. She gazed at the city skyline outside her window, tears finally overtaking her composure. The weight of the baby in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. Her child was counting on her to provide stability and security. Yet Alexander's relentless legal maneuvers threatened everything she was trying to build. In that moment, she made another life-changing decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years, an old family connection in England, who owned a country estate far from the paparazzi's reach. The phone rang, and a familiar voice answered. "Aunt Rosalind," Clarissa said, her voice trembling. "I need a place to stay, somewhere I can clear my head. Is your guest cottage still available?" Her aunt's warm reply was immediate. "Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish." Clarissa ended the call, a surge of relief coursing through her. If Alexander wanted to wage war, fine, but she wouldn't remain a sitting target. She would remove herself from the toxic environment, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on her child's well-being. The estate in England was secluded, nestled in lush countryside, the perfect retreat where she could gather her strength and prepare for the final battles to come. She spent the rest of the evening making arrangements, instructing Margaret on how to handle any urgent legal matters in her absence, coordinating with Winston to keep an eye on the estate, and packing essentials for the journey. A strange calm took hold of her as she placed each folded maternity garment into her suitcase. She was no longer passively reacting to Alexander's betrayals. She was charting her own course. At midnight, Clarissa stood by the nursery she'd only just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. "We'll come back," she whispered to the unborn child. "But for now, we need a safe haven." She left the nursery lights off, gently closing the door behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity for healing, and her willingness to protect what truly mattered. Regardless of Alexander's tactics, Clarissa was determined that neither she nor her child would live in the shadows of his ego and deception ever again. Clarissa's departure from New York was quiet, shrouded in secrecy to avoid the press. A private car whisked her to a discreet gate at the airport, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. The aircraft hummed gently as it rose above the city lights, each twinkle below her growing distant until the skyline was nothing more than a memory. The flight offered time for reflection. In the silent cocoon of the cabin, she flipped through photographs of her and Alexander from years past. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope, honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter and golden sunsets, snapshots of philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm. Each image felt like a relic from another era, proof that once they had shared something precious. Where did it all go wrong, she wondered, though the question no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward. Answers might never come, and that was acceptable. By dawn, the plane touched down on the fog-veiled runway of a private airfield in England. Waiting for her was Aunt Rosalind, a regal woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair. She enveloped Clarissa in a warm embrace the moment they met on the tarmac. "My darling girl," she murmured, "you've been through so much." Clarissa felt tears threaten to spill. "I need some time away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley that carried them through rolling hills, past grazing sheep and stone cottages. Eventually, they arrived at a sprawling countryside manor, Aunt Rosalind's ancestral home. Clarissa was shown to a quaint guest cottage with ivy climbing its walls, flower boxes brimming with lavender, and a little pond nestled behind it, surrounded by willow trees. It was a world apart from the opulence of the Harrington estate, yet just as enchanting in its own right. Over the next few days, Clarissa settled into a gentle routine, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoons sipping tea with Aunt Rosalind, and evenings reading by the fire. The relentless hammering of paparazzi and the digital storm of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret daily, learning that Alexander's legal team was livid about her disappearance, but there was little they could do. Legally, she was free to travel. Winston reported that the media had calmed somewhat, disappointed to find no further drama at the Harrington estate. One drizzly afternoon, as Clarissa lounged in a cushioned window seat, she felt a firm little kick inside her belly. She smiled, placing a hand over the spot. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. "Stronger than I ever was." In that moment, she realized how much she had changed in just a matter of weeks. No longer the hesitant wife striving to keep up appearances, she felt a quiet power blooming inside her, a determination to create a life of peace and integrity for her child. Occasionally, her mind drifted to Alexander. She'd wonder if he regretted his actions, if he missed her, or if he was merely strategizing his next business move. But those thoughts no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a sign of healing. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more fiercely than anything else. It was that love that propelled her onward. Aunt Rosalind's estate became a sanctuary for introspection, a place where Clarissa could nurture both her pregnancy and her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it, her resolve solidified like the ancient stones in the manor walls. She would finalize the divorce on her own terms, ensure her child's future was secure, and continue her philanthropic passion. If Alexander wanted to remain locked in his cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. Sitting by the pond one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in lilac and gold, Clarissa exhaled softly. The reflections of the willow trees rippled on the water's surface, reminding her of life's impermanence. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could shape what would come next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, heart lightened, ready to face the final notes of her confrontation with Alexander whenever that day would come. For now, she found solace in the hush of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence, and the life growing inside her both delicate and immensely strong. Outside a quiet English manor, beneath a sky of lavender and gold, Clarissa has finally found a sanctuary for herself and for the child she carries. Though her journey began in heartbreak and betrayal, it transformed into a testament of courage, self-discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Still, the world watches, waiting to see if Alexander Harrington will repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he fought so hard to build. In the meantime, Clarissa holds fast to her hopes for a future defined by love, integrity, and resilience. Will this billionaire's betrayal spark a revolution in Clarissa's life? Or will old wounds heal into a fragile truce?